Welcome to The Truth in This Art Beyond, and we are back in Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love. I am your host, Rob Lee. And today, I'm excited to be in conversation with my next guest, a Philadelphia native who is a versatile trombonist, the founder of the Center City Jazz Festival, and a program director specializing in jazz for the Mid-Atlantic Arts. He's performed with an impressive list of artists, including The Roots, Orrin Evans, Billy Paul, Aretha Franklin, Terrell Stanford, Seal, John Legend, Red Baraat, the Teskey Brothers, and many others. Please welcome Ernest Stuart. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on. Thank you for making the time. I'm glad we were able to chat a few minutes before we got started. I find,
yeah, of course,
being able to provide a little more context, it's funny, like creatives, artists, their feelings, their thoughts that go on. It's like, all right, what am I giving here? But being able to that sort of extra context, it's like, man, I barely know what I'm doing. So I appreciate you making the time.
Yeah, it's all good. I love talking about music and art and all that.
Yeah. So before we get into the big crux of the music, the art, and all of that work, I want to give you the space to, introduce yourself and, share what it was like growing up in the Philadelphia area. And I asked that because I find that people have that bio and it's like, oh, okay, but how do you really describe yourself? And I'm like, it's like, I'm a jazz quasar. It's like, all right, then.
Yeah, I don't know. I've been struggling to figure out my title in this creative or cultural landscape. I began my artistic life as a musician. I started playing when I was 12 by accident. I wasn't supposed to play the trombone. I'm a trombonist, but I wanted to be a saxophonist like everyone else. Like everyone else. If you go to any jam session tonight, you will see about 20 saxophone players, maybe one trumpet, no trombones. I basically signed up for the music class without having any plan of getting, a rental saxophone. I just really wanted to take music in middle school. And I basically got called down to the front of the classroom by the music teacher after a couple of weeks of not having an instrument. And she was like, man, what are you doing? And, I was like, well, my mom can't afford a saxophone. And she was like, well, do you want to play one of the instruments in the back? And I said, okay, what you got back there? Thinking she had a trumpet or something. And she said, well, we got a tuba. And I was like, nah, I'm good. No, thank you. And she was like, well, how about a baritone horn? And I was like, what's that? And she was like, it's like a small tuba. And I was like, nah, I'm good. Thank you. And she was like, well, okay, well, how about the trombone? We got a trombone back there. And I was like, nah, I'm good. And she was like, well, you got to drop the class and take something else. And I was like, all right, okay, fine. I'll take the trombone, So she gave me the trombone. I took it home that night. And, the rest, by the time that was in 6th grade, I was 12 years old. And by the time I got to 9th grade, 14 years old, I knew that was what I was going to do for the rest of my life. So I went and got my first job at McDonald's to pay for trombone lessons. And yeah.
I almost want to hear the McDonald's jingle with the trombone playing.
Yeah, well, no, because Popeyes has the trombone fast food market cornered.
That's great.
With their jingle right now. So yeah, McDonald's would be infringing right there.
Yeah, just especially with McDonald's in their marketing to the urban demo. Thank you. Hearing sort of that, introductory and kind of like just wasn't sort of the plan initially.
Right.
Um, I'll say like one of the first times I recorded anything, like having like the handy recorder, was around that age, probably somewhere between 12 and 14, somewhere in that, and having the little handy recorder. And I can remember specifically freshman year in high school, going around talking to people. I'm going to set the stage. I'm 38. So I was definitely an attitude era kid for like WWE. And
that was a good era.
Yes, it was. I used to speak in the third person like I was The Rock. So you know where this is going. You know where this is going. It's not good.
Oh my goodness.
I used to pull out the mic and it's like, so the Rob says, are you going to be here next semester? Your grades on point? And I was like, what is this after school special? That was the energy.
Oh my goodness. That's amazing.
Yeah, I do this to embarrass myself most of the time.
Yeah. No, but it's incredible how that, I mean, I can't, starting from that to where you are now, or starting from what I began with, getting the instrument by accident, and then doing some of the things that I've done, throughout my career, it's really amazing how those little seeds, can sort of sprout into something really amazing. And even if it's only amazing to you, it's nice to look back on it and say, wow, that, some things were accomplished.
Yeah. Being able, and that's one of the reasons why I have sort of those introductory, I want to know about like what it was growing up for a person, but really, talk about that sort of introductory creative journey. That's really where it's at. Like, what were the formative moments growing up that resonate now, that really pop up now? And, for a long time in this sort of podcast journey, as I was sharing with you before we got started, it wasn't doing interviews. It was kind of in my small circle of friends. We're doing our thing. We're talking movies, talking pop culture, and keeping it rolling. Now it's being able to talk with people a la then, not in the third person, not talking like The Rock, not doing the thing, but really trying to, give people space to share what they got going on.
Of course.
So, you had that sort of period. So talk more about sort of, that journey. Like, what was school like after that? Like, whether it was college, conservatory, talk about that.
Yeah. So once I got to high school and really began taking it seriously, I began auditioning for all of the regional bands and orchestras. And, I grew up in a little town called Pensacola, New Jersey, which is a literal 5-minute drive to Philadelphia. So very much in the Philadelphia area and region. I was going over the bridge for a lot of rehearsals and high school jazz stuff, jazz camps, and and it was great because I began meeting other weirdo kids who were obsessed with jazz like I was at that age. It's such a weird thing to be obsessed with. Me and my best friend used to drive around together blasting like big band music from so it was wild. I could only imagine what people were thinking, hearing this music pouring out of this car and seeing two kids, it was crazy. But, all of a sudden I get to, after high school, I went to Temple in Philly. And it was the first time that I was completely surrounded by people who were very serious about, this music and being musicians. And it was incredible, and it was sort of also my introduction to the music scene in Philadelphia. Throughout college, I was getting into a lot of other things and really trying to explore more, outside of jazz, but what does it mean to be a professional musician? And I began going out every night with my horn, and back then we had enough of a scene to walk around and go hop from place to place to place with your horn, and people see you with your horn and they're like, yo, man, you want to play a couple of songs? Or, and I would go out every night and that's what I would do. I knew that eventually I'll be out of college and I would have to, sort of figure out what I was going to be doing.
Yeah.
And yeah, eventually I began working around town because of that. I kind of had it in my mind, like I said earlier, about there's no trombonists at jam sessions, 20 saxophone players. I knew that I would be the only person playing trombone at these sessions. Yeah. So I would also go to jazz sessions, like jam sessions, all the time. And because I was the only trombonist there, whenever people would need a trombonist for something, like horn section work behind an R&B artist, or, a salsa gig or anything, they would call me because I was the only trombonist they knew. I can't tell you how many times people were like, yeah, I just needed a trombonist. You was the only guy I knew. like the plan is working.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was fun. I played so many salsa gigs around Philly when I was in college. It was wild. I was doing multiple gigs a week just playing salsa, and trying to immerse myself in that sort of gig and learn how to dance, and it was fun. It was a really, really, really fun time, and I really enjoyed it. But at the same time, there were a lot of R&B gigs, neo soul gigs. So doing neo soul gigs with people who to me were stars, and getting around the scene that way, traveling up to New York to do stuff, and getting mixed in with some of the things happening with the Roots, and it was fun. It was a lot of fun around then.
So is there like a seminal moment that comes to mind that, you touched on Temple, you touched on being able to do just multiple gigs, salsa, some neo soul stuff, R&B. Is there one that really sticks out that, was very influential in your development as a musician? And, I definitely keyed in on, you said the Temple thing where you're around people who are taking it seriously.
Sure.
And
sure.
I think being around creatives,
of course,
like, no, I gotta get my thing on. I can't be messing around.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I remember being around my trombone instructor, and I was like probably in my third or fourth year in college, and it was like, man, if this guy doesn't call me for a gig that he can't make after I graduate, it's my fault. If he can't trust me with a gig, it's my fault. And that made me realize that the power to control my career rests with me. It's in my hands, and it's up to me to say, I'm either going to be employable as a musician or I'm not. I'm either going to get out there, hustle, find the work myself, or I'm not. I'm either going to put in the work so that people, trust their music with me, and that was a big turning point. Like once I realized that, it was a big turning point for me. And I began, even though I came in to Temple quite serious about music, after realizing that sort of late in my undergrad, I began to just sort of turn it around. I knew immediately that I didn't have much time left in the protective covering of school, and I would have to, become a musician or find something else to do,
Yeah, I mean, using the bird analogy, you don't want to be an owl that can't spread their wings. You don't want to fall off the tree as an owl.
Yeah, exactly. And that led to a really sort of powerful moment in my education and my sort of, once I got into my head that this is it. I'm going to live and die by this thing. Sure. Everything changed. I began going up to New York a lot more. I've been, hanging out with musicians up there and going around town in Philly. I started running the jam session at this place called Ortlieb's and meeting more musicians and really diving deeply into music and the music scenes and the music community, regionally, but specifically in Philadelphia. Actually, it led to me, all of my travel into New York led to me getting my first gig in New York when I graduated from Temple. And it was this week-long engagement, a live recording at the Blue Note Jazz Club in New York. And, the person who called me for it never even heard me play before, but because I was always up there, showing, giving FaceTime and, like talking to people, they just assumed that I could handle the gig. So they called me for this live recording. It was the first paid gig I ever had in New York. And it was, there was jazz legends on that recording that I had no idea what I was, that I was playing with these people at the time. It was incredible, a really incredible experience.
That's dope. That's dope. And I want to comment on one thing, which I think is really funny. When you were describing like just, driving around, being a teenager and just like, it's just jazz emanating from the car.
Yeah.
I don't want anyone to ever like hear my headphones come loose when I'm in the gym or what have you. Just hear like a hard bop going. It's like, why is this music from like Batman animated series? Like, what is this? Because I'll listen to some Charles Mingus. Like, I was like, look,
that's amazing. Yeah, that's amazing.
So, you touched on it a little bit earlier. So maybe like over time, right? Could you describe like, the Philadelphia jazz scene for just for someone who doesn't get it? Because I find like, I had an interview last week where someone was talking about the Baltimore jazz scene. And it's like, we have roots here, but people don't talk about it. It's like, oh, it doesn't exist. And then you end up seeing a documentary, and it's a very interesting documentary. It's one side, and different communities, different people who are integral to the genre aren't in it. So I like to give that sort of space of, from your vantage point, how would you describe the Philadelphia jazz scene, and how have you seen it like kind of transform over the time that you've been playing?
Sure. Philadelphia historically has had an incredible jazz scene. The musicians that, have come from Philadelphia have been some of the most impactful musicians on the scene or in the sort of jazz canon. They call Philadelphia the great incubator. And I think it's because the way Philadelphia sort of nurtures talent at a young age, it's really incredible. I would say that from the time that I began sort of performing around town, there has definitely been a decline in opportunities from given by well-established venues that are regularly presenting jazz. Jazz clubs, essentially. We've lost quite a few of them over the years, and it's funny because when I was younger, all of the older cats would say, oh man, there's no place to play now and all. But compared to what it is now, it was way better, So, after I would say that one thing I love about the current generation of jazz musicians in Philadelphia is that they've had to become very, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, they've had to use some ingenuity to create their own scene. They had to construct their own scenes, and their own places to play and find, and it's really amazing to watch that process.
Very resourceful. Yeah.
Yeah, being extremely resourceful and making pathways and lanes for themselves.
Yeah. So as you've kind of transitioned and added, not necessarily transition because you're still performing, but as you've added some of this art advocacy roles, namely, Mid-Atlantic Arts and Center City Jazz Festival. So
Center City Jazz Fest, yeah.
So talk about both of those and like how like maybe your eye have shifted as being in, the scene, working in the scene, but now being in a spot where you can maybe affect change and support in a way.
So, I created the Jazz Festival once that jazz club that I used to run the jam session in, Ortlieb's. Once that closed, it was dark. It was super dark. And, I was just like, I gotta find something to do. And I probably spent a year complaining about it in a bar, with other musicians before, getting to the point where it's like, okay, complaining's done. It's time to do something. But I do think I will say that complaining is a part of the process. That's how you sort of sort out your thoughts or your feelings. And it's like, okay, this is what I like and this is what I don't like about what's happening around town. And then, I think the next step should be, figuring out what you can do. And what I thought I could do was create a jazz festival for the jazz musicians in town.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be huge or anything like that. It just needs to be effective, and it needs to employ a good amount of local jazz musicians and showcase their talent.
Yeah.
Because there are some incredible musicians in town. And, at the time there was a big jazz fest in Philly, but they weren't really putting jazz on the main stage, and all the local people were sort of put into the smaller venues off to the side. And it's just like, man, how can we just make a festival for these people? Because they are the attraction in my mind. So I created, I launched a Kickstarter campaign and created a jazz festival and across 5 venues within walking distance of each other. And, it's just really chaotic setup where you get one wristband and can sort of walk around to all of the other venues, and all of the music is happening at once. And I wanted to create that feeling that for like the little second I felt like I had, that I can just walk into venues, and hear music all the time and bounce from place to place. I wanted to extend that feeling to other people. But through that process of creating the festival, I began working a lot with some local arts organizations, and I began understanding more about the nonprofit arts world. And, that eventually, after years of running the festival, we ran into COVID, and it's like, what should I do with my time? Now that touring's done. And I decided to go back to school and get my master's in nonprofit management from Columbia up here in New York, and really sort of figure out, okay, I've been working with arts nonprofits for quite a while, and I want to understand more about nonprofits and sort of, if I can, make myself a better resource for those arts nonprofits in Philadelphia that I've worked with often throughout the years in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
And it's been really interesting to now be working for Mid-Atlantic Arts, and being able to reach out to some of these organizations and say, hey, did you hear about this opportunity? This is how you could get money. Let me help you find this money. Or talking to musicians and saying, hey, did you hear about this grant? You really need to be, looking at this grant and start devising ways to bring people to information that they need and could be very beneficial for their careers and for their organizations. And that's something that I really love about what I'm doing right now.
Thank you. That's great, and I love hearing that. Like, it's I find like maybe over the last few years, I think some of the funding stuff, some of those sort of conversations of what do people need, how can we help, and so on. I think too often you get caught in this whole fundraisers or talking in that way, and it's vague, it's nebulous, and people don't have time to try to understand some of this stuff. It's like, I need this and I need to work. So can someone make this simpler? And having someone that's sort of in the scene that gets it, that's another thing that's really important. Like, I've looked at it a few times myself of being in this cross section or this intersection, because, using those terms, of being in journalists, being in a sort of a media artist, journalist, storyteller, all of this different stuff. And it's like, how can I refine this for someone who's coming up behind me?
Right.
I help provide that sort of lane and that structure of, this is the way you want to go about this, or this is the way that you could go about this.
Right.
It's sort of that funding. And, seeing folks, I'll go out there and check, and you'll see someone might do 8 podcasts, 8 episodes, right?
Right.
And you'll see like, oh yeah, they were funded for $65,000. It's like, hold up, what? How? And I did 300 last year, and so I can imagine that sort of frustration. And I like that other thing, right? Just part of the process is complaining. I love that. Because I think you're able to identify what it is. I think it has to be strategic in a way. Like, all right, what is that next step? What are you going to do from that point? Or is it just the same complaint? It's like it's like that Hannibal Buress joke when he was talking about younger comedians, these young cats, man. And it's like, come on. It's like, eventually it's like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do to remedy your situation?
Exactly. And I think, first of all, I think you said the right thing, refine the process for other people. Mm-hmm. You can't eliminate this process of grant writing and all of this stuff, but you can refine it, and you can say, look, on my end, let me see how I can make this a smoother process for people who are working and who are doing other things, and can't commit the chunk of time needed for many of these grant applications. Mm-hmm. And how can we streamline this for the people so that the right people are getting the funds? But also, I think complaining about things is, you can be strategic about how you complain, because there's a lot of good people out there with good ideas, and you start complaining to them and they see it from a completely different, they agree with your complaint, but their complaint is slightly different than your complaint. And you're like, oh, I never thought about this issue, in that way. So it's really interesting, I think, to share that sort of communal complaint and issues, and really sort of commiserate with everyone, and see what you can create out of that.
It's getting a sense of like, what are you experiencing? Let's, commiserate.
Exactly.
Right. What are you experiencing? And, how can we come through it? And I think here locally, we had this sort of, grant situation that worked out really well. It's just like an artist grant, and a lot of those sort of barriers that were there that, where people aren't completing the application because the percentage or the requirements that you touched on is a bit much, like, hey, I need you to come to 10 sessions that are 3 hours long. It's like, I'm working and I'm making art. So it's hard to do like all of that.
Right.
At the end of the day, it's like, and here's your $3,500. It's like, what? What am I going to do with that?
Yeah. Well, and I think there is, some sort of, the idea is that if we can educate you on how to do this, I think the intention behind some of it is good.
Yeah.
But the reality is that, look, I'm out here hustling. I can't commit this much time to something with this little payoff. I mean, it's just like it doesn't equal the same. It's like maybe that organization, you need to point out how effective this thing is going to be that we're asking you to do, and how this is going to impact your career. Yeah. So at the end of it, you're only getting $3,500, but you're going to learn something and meet a cohort of individuals that are going to change your life.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then sure, you could keep the money. If I'm going to, don't keep the money. I'm playing. But you know what I'm saying? Yeah. It could be extremely powerful if you can convey, effectively convey what the individual is going to gain from participating in what you're offering. And that's something that I go through pretty regularly at Mid-Atlantic Arts now, where I have to build the programming, around people who don't need to be there, or around the needs of people who don't really need to be involved. So how can you get them, excited about what you're doing or what you're offering? Yeah. Because it's not me saying, here's money. It's, I'm going to show you how to get that money, but if you do this, it's going to really help your career, because what I see is that there's a lot of people, like the same people get money, get the grants, and there's a ton of talented people out there that are, that process is so opaque to them and they don't understand it. And they're just like, nah, I'm just going to be out here gigging. And you're like, yeah, you can still do that. Trust me. But there's an organization over here who's going to give you $15,000 to go on a tour. Yeah. Why wouldn't you at least make some attempt at this? Right. And it's like, how can you reduce those barriers? And, and again, it's like, yeah, I'm not going to give you money to participate in this summit that I might have, but it's my job to show you that the value of you attending the summit is extremely high.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Thank you. So I got one last real question.
Okay.
Before I get into the rapid fire questions, and in a sentence or so, and what would you say is the biggest way that jazz has performed has transformed, not jazz has performed, jazz has transformed your life?
It's giving me community, Yeah. And yes, immediate community in Philadelphia or in New York, regionally, but it's giving me a global community. Yeah. I can walk into a jazz club in Belgium, play Now's the Time. Yeah. And I'm with my comrades, with my brothers and sisters, and we are a part of the same community and we speak the same language, even if we don't speak the same language. And I think there's something just downright beautiful about that, and I'm extremely appreciative of that. And it shrinks the world in a way that I wish that everyone could experience,
So that's kind of the real pod. Now it's time to get weird. It's kind of trying to get rapid fire stuff.
Cool.
And so I got 5 of them for you. And don't overthink them. Quick answer. Okay. If you were not a musician, what would you be? If you were not music at all?
A photographer.
Okay. What makes jazz, let's say macroly speaking, not purely the music, but the sort of jazz macroly speaking, what makes it so unique?
Improvisation.
Okay. Love improvisation. Do you prefer to start your day with tea or coffee?
Coffee.
You get it. You get it. Actually, I have six of them. I had another one for you. What is your favorite color combination?
Yeah, I'm just gonna go with black and white.
Okay. What is a jazz thing that you say too much?
There's so many of them. I've already said cats a couple of times.
I was hoping for that one, actually.
Definitely, if I'm talking about money, I'll say bread. And like people are looking at me like, what did you just say?
And we're gluten free, bro.
Yeah. Like, man, where's the bread? Did you get the bread yet? It's like, nah, I don't know. You talking about my guy. Yeah. Definitely cats though. Cats, I think I use that all the time. Yeah.
Jazz people are so Okay, this is the last one. This is the last one. And I think a good follow-up. I remember back in high school, we had a lot of we had a really musically inclined high school. I hung out with some of the musicians there, and there was a lot of trombone related humor. So do you have any trombone related jokes or humor or puns, anything that comes to mind?
Oh my goodness.
Why
are you gonna make me do this? All right, this is messed up. I should not be making jokes at my own expense or at the expense of trombonists worldwide. What's the difference between a trombonist and a piece of pie?
What's the difference?
Like a pizza.
Yeah. What's the difference?
A pizza could feed a family of 4.
Wow. It's incredibly spicy.
Yeah, it's dark. It's dark. It only gets worse from there, folks.
That's great. Trump being a podcaster. Oh man, that's one of the best ways to end a podcast. So one, I want to thank you again for coming onto the podcast. This has been
thank you. It's been a pleasure to meet you for sure.
Likewise. And secondly, I want to, again, offer up the space for you to, share with the fine folks, the listeners, where they can check you out, more about your work, your website, social media, all of that good stuff. The floor is yours.
Sure. So check me out at Only Ernest, ERNEST, because I'm probably the only Ernest that you or anyone knows. I don't know why my name is Ernest, but to go to Instagram and find me at Only Ernest. And yeah, from there you could get to any other pertinent information. But yeah, and if you're in the Mid-Atlantic region, check out Mid-Atlantic Art's website. It's really informative, and there's opportunities for artists and organizations, and yeah, it's a really informative place for sure.
And there you have it, folks. I want to again thank Ernest Stuart for coming on to the podcast. And I'm Rob Lee, saying that there's art and culture in and around your neck of the woods. You've just got to look for it.